Hi everybody, this is the lecture to accompany Chapter 12 in your textbook. Please carefully read Chapter 12. There are a lot of things that I don't have time to address in this lecture. Okay, let's talk about deceptive communication. Despite what we would like to think about ourselves, we spend a lot of time deceiving the other people in our lives. We use deception for many reasons. We think of it negatively, but really it's far more complicated than that. We're not here today to study it with the intention of using it to our advantage, but we do need to more fully understand it so that we can see how we use it for both good and not so good purposes. What is deception? It is intentionally transmitting information to create a false belief in the hearer. If you communicate false information in a way that is meant to make someone believe something that you know to be untrue, that's deception. Now, when we think of deception and the fact that we think about it negatively, that's probably because we are thinking about what are called high-stakes lies. High-stakes lies are the kinds of things where if you get caught, the penalties can be very, very severe. And those fall into two different categories. You've got fraudulent lies, such as forging a signature or writing a bad check or engaging in insider trading, misrepresenting your income on your tax return, filing a false insurance claim, or committing perjury, lying to a jury. These lies can be very damaging to your career, to your life, because they carry legal ramifications. However, some high-stakes lies are personal. Lying to your spouse about an affair, or maybe lying to your boss about a mistake you made at work. If those lies are found out, then you're not going to have a marriage or a job. Fortunately, most of the interpersonal deception that we are guilty of is of the low-stakes variety. In low-stakes lying, the penalties for getting caught are fairly mild. Another word or another phrase for these kinds of lies are little white lies. So here are a couple of examples: saying you're happy to meet someone when you're really not, saying you have plans to get out of an undesirable social commitment, falsely complimenting someone's appearance. We usually tell these lies to avoid hurting other people's feelings or to avoid embarrassment on our part. And frankly, when these lies are found out, the most likely outcome is that we're going to feel embarrassed and a little bit silly. So a couple of things have to be in place for deception to occur. And so if they're not present, then you haven't lied. So when is a lie not a lie? Well, you aren't lying if you believe that what you say is true. You could certainly mistakenly give people false information. If you really believed it was the truth, then you're not guilty of lying. You might be guilty of poor research or gullibility, but not lying. You're also not lying if you don't intend for others to believe what you're saying. So if you're just kidding, making a joke, being sarcastic, usually it's easy to tell, but somebody might actually believe you. For example, a lot of conservatives actually loved Stephen Colbert when he first had that show called The Colbert Report on the Comedy Channel. He had a character who was conservative, but actually he was using that as political satire, and a lot of conservatives didn't realize that. But yeah, sarcasm and political satire is sometimes hard for some people to pinpoint. Also, despite what you may believe, you cannot lie to yourself. While people might be able to justify their own ideas and their own opinions and even their own actions, or they could be in denial as to the actual truth of something, like an alcoholic who insists that he doesn't have a problem with alcohol. You simply cannot logically lie to yourself. So for purposes of what the textbook is talking about, the sender and the receiver of the deceptive message have to be two different people for it to be interpersonal deception. It's the transmission of false information that makes it a lie. So nonverbal communication can certainly be used to transmit false information. There's an example in the book about roommates. Well, they were actually cohabiting, but they didn't want their parents to know about that. So when the parents would come over, the two roommates would pretend like they were only roommates living in separate bedrooms, which wasn't the case. But because of all their nonverbal communication, that's what it looked like. Deception is deception, regardless of your motive. Sometimes we don't really think of it as a lie if we're doing it for what we believe are the right reasons, which are usually to avoid hurting someone's feelings, or even because the truth might be physically or mentally too painful for the person to bear. But really, it's still deception. Deception is a common component in politeness. In our interactions, we try not to cause offense, insult, or to hurt others by telling them the truth. In fact, we even teach our little children to be deceptive. For instance, a little kid in the store might point at somebody and say, "Mommy, why is that lady so fat?" Of course, the mother goes ballistic and pulls the child aside and tells them it's rude to say things like that because they could hurt other people. Imagine what life would be like if we told the unvarnished truth all the time. You've probably seen the movie Liar, Liar, or maybe The Invention of Lying. They're funny, but really, there are important social reasons why we use deception. Someone who's totally and completely honest probably doesn't have a lot of friends. Deception is especially common when communicating online. Because identities can be so easily hidden online, there's a lot of deception that goes on. Anonymity can protect our privacy, but it can also lead to the disinhibition effect, where you may say things online that you would not say in person. The book uses the example of dating sites. Now, if you've ever used them, you know you really can't take anything you read on them at face value, because there is a lot of deception. So what are people on these dating sites lying about? Well, for women, they lie about things the men are looking for: their age, their weight, their physical appearance. For men, they lie about what they think women are looking for: their educational level, their income, their height, their age, even their marital status. Yes, 13% of men on these dating sites are actually married. So why do they lie? Because unfortunately, being honest on these sites actually means that you're going to have less chance of success in finding a date online. On these sites, people don't really want to know the truth about you, at least not right up front. They just want to find someone interesting, and if they think you are, then they might contact you to see how much of what you said is actually true. People lie for a variety of reasons. Here are some of them. Some lies benefit the hearer. You say, "Wow, I really like your new haircut," even though you don't like their new haircut. That makes that person feel better about themselves. Some lies help you to get to know someone. If you've just met someone and you think they're cute, or you like to get to know them better, and they happen to mention they like country music, you might say you like it too, even though you don't. Some lies protect people's privacy. The most common lie told on the planet is, "Everything's fine, thanks for asking," when everything is obviously not fine. But you don't think it's any of this person's business, or maybe you don't want to explain it. Regardless, you believe that it is your business, and you don't really want to answer that question, so you lie. Some lies help you to avoid conflict. If your significant other insists that you go to a party with them, you might say, "Sure, I'll go to the party with you," and then spend the rest of the week trying to get out of that, because that's really the last place you want to go. But if you say that, it might cause some kind of conflict with that other person. Some lies make you look better. You mention that you work in the district attorney's office, and then the person you're talking to assumes you're a lawyer when actually you're a file clerk, but you think, "Oh, well, it's not that big a deal. They'll never know," and it makes you look smarter. Some lies help you to avoid punishment. You say, "I don't know what happened to that $20 that was sitting on the dresser," when you actually took that $20. And some lies help you protect yourself against distress, making up a story so you won't have to go to dinner at your uncle's house because your aunt always wants to know why you're not married and don't have any kids. So as you can see, there are lots of reasons why people lie. And there are different types of lies. And I think sometimes we believe that we're not lying because it doesn't fall into a particular type. Some deceptive acts are what are called acts of simulation, and these involve actually fabricating information or exaggerating information for the purpose of deception. People can lie through falsification. Now, this is the kind of lying that we think of when we think of lying. Outright lying, where you're communicating false information as if it were true information. As an example, maybe you're lying on an employment form saying you held a position at your last job that you didn't actually do. That's falsification. Another act of simulation is called exaggeration. Exaggeration is inflating or overstating facts. So while there might be some truth to the statement, you make it appear as if it's bigger or greater or more important than it actually is. As an example, you might make yourself seem more qualified for a position by overstating your actual responsibilities on a job that you really did hold. So yes, you had that job, but when you're talking about the responsibilities that you had, you overstated them. Some deceptive acts are acts of dissimulation. And in dissimulation, you're failing to convey information or details that would be necessary for a complete understanding. So withholding the information so that the hearer will get the wrong impression. Yes, you can lie through omission, and that is leaving out particular details or parts of a story to create a false impression. And we've all done this. For example, the person that said that they worked at the district attorney's office left out the part about them being the file clerk and left a false impression that they were a lawyer. Then equivocation, and that is making ambiguous statements to give the false impression that you've said something that you actually haven't. And we actually talked about this in the chapter on language when I gave the example of someone inviting you to a party and you don't want to go and you say, "Oh, that sounds like fun." That could be interpreted in many different ways. Most of us overestimate how good we are at detecting deception. Mostly it's because we actually want to believe that people are telling us the truth. We don't like to be lied to. Detecting deception is fairly difficult. We tend to focus on things like eye contact or the lack of eye contact, but that's really not a good indicator. Also, we have what's called a truth bias, which means that in the absence of any reason not to believe someone, we tend to believe them. The textbook says that we can only tell if someone is lying about 55% of the time, and that's not very good odds. There are some behaviors that are common during acts of deception. These are not necessarily consistent from person to person or with every lie that they tell. False information is often inconsistent, and this is why cops ask people what happened over and over again or split up two people and ask them separately what happened, because people tend to slip up and say something different than the first time they said it, or the two people might have different stories. Also, your words and actions might not match up, or someone may innocently, or not so innocently, say they saw you somewhere that you said you weren't. Yes, absolutely. People are caught in lies a lot because some third party happens to mention to the person that you're lying to something that kind of spills the beans on the lie. Deceivers often commit speech errors, taking excessively long pauses, using vocal fillers like and more than usual, taking extra time to answer people's questions. Guilt can cause speech pattern to become less fluent than normal. Deception often increases your vocal pitch. Nervousness and agitation can cause your pitch to rise. And this is actually a very good clue because most people don't even realize that they're doing this. 2 eye behaviors are associated with lying. Eye contact, as I said, is a poor clue. However, blinking and pupil dilation are good clues. If you are blinking more than usual, that may be a sign that you're lying, and if your pupils are dilated, that also might be a sign. Nervousness or anxiousness may make you blink more than usual or cause your pupils to open up wider. Liars often use false smiles. Fake smiles that don't cause the skin at the edge of your eyes to wrinkle up mean the person might be trying to hide distress. And many liars use minimal body movement because they might be trying very hard to control themselves, and so they may move less. Even though these are reliable clues, remember that none of these clues is foolproof. None of these clues point to definite lying. And people do all of these things for reasons other than lying. But the tendency to do them when lying is increased. So you'll have to use your common sense and maybe your sixth sense as well to determine whether or not someone is lying to you. So when you suspect deception, remember that familiarity affects detection success. While you may think that because you know someone, you're more likely to be able to tell when they're lying, in actuality, you're more able to detect deception with strangers than friends. This is because of the truth bias. However, if you've caught a friend or family member in a lie before, then you might actually have a lie bias towards that person. Then you might regard anything that person says with suspicion, whether it's true or not. Expressive people are better liars. So highly expressive people are often high self-monitors, so they're very aware of how they appear to others and how they express themselves. They might be better at covering up any telltale clues that they're lying. Now, being expressive doesn't mean that you lie more, but it just means that you're better at deception and covering up the fact that you are lying about something. Culture matters, but only sometimes. If our natural inclination is to distrust someone from another culture, then we might assume they're being deceptive, even if they're not, just based on their communication behaviors, both verbal and nonverbal. But when we have normal face-to-face conversations with them, then it really doesn't matter if that person is from our culture or from another culture. Our ability to detect deception remains fairly equal. And motivation doesn't always help. Being highly motivated to avoid detection doesn't help us when we're lying. There's something called the motivation impairment effect. This says that when the stakes are high, we're actually worse at escaping detection because we get so nervous that we make mistakes. And that's probably why so many criminals get caught in their own lies. Suspicion may not improve your detection ability. So when we're suspicious, we tend to look for more clues, which would lead you to think that you'd be better able to detect deception, but not necessarily. There's something called the interpersonal deception theory that says that skilled liars can tell when people are suspicious and adapt their communication behaviors to appear more honest. There's also something called the Othello error. Othello was a character in Shakespeare's play, and he was told by his friend that his wife was unfaithful to him. Well, she wasn't unfaithful to him, but he believed the lies his friend was telling him and ended up killing her. He was suspicious of her, but suspicion may make you think someone is lying even when they are being truthful. Also, non-interactive contexts are best for detecting deception. In interactive contexts like face-to-face, telephone, Skype, when you can hear their voice and maybe see their face, people are more likely to believe you. Whereas in non-interactive contexts like email or voicemail, that makes it more likely that someone would pick up signs of deception. In conclusion, whether you like to think of yourself as a very honest person or not, hopefully you understand now that deception is very common in our interpersonal relationships. We're mostly guilty of the low-stakes variety of deception. However, high-stakes lies can cause great distress, conflict, and distrust in our relationships. Fortunately, you can use the skills that you've learned in previous chapters to respond to the emotional distress of deception more effectively, to repair the damage deception can cause, to help you make the commitment to be more honest because you see how much your relationships improve when you are honest, and to manage conflict and maintain your interpersonal relationships. This is the end of the lecture to accompany Chapter 12.